Hi, my name is Tam from the 1A class, and welcome to my presentation. Today I'm going to talk about isolation and reproductive hormone in men. For several decades, soy-based foods has been recognized as plant sources of high-quality protein. According to AC Nielsen Vietnam ranked first in the world after China and Thailand in terms of soy milk consumption and ranked seventh in the world. But in recent years, these foods have received considerable attention for their possible role in providing health benefits, independent of their nutritional content. In large part, this is because they are essentially unique dietary sources of isoflavones, a group of diphenolic chemicals classified as phytoestrogens, and it is thought that men should not consume too much soy milk because it can affect reproductive hormones and cause feminization. And the purpose of my presentation today is answer to this question: should men drink soy milk? So I've divided my presentation into three parts. The first is introduction, the second is effect on hormones, and the last is conclusions. So after my presentation, all of your questions and comments are welcomed. Now I will start with some general information about isolevins. So what is isolevins? Isolevins are diphenolic compounds that bind to estrogen receptors and exert some estrogen-like effects under certain experimental conditions. Therefore, this reason they are classified as phytoestrogens and isoflavones, including genistein 50%, lysine 40%, and lysine 10%. So you can easily find it in soy and its products or legumes. Now we will move on to their structures. So if you look at this, you will see the structure of isolevins are very similar to the structure of human estrogen. And isolevins have a chemical structure similar to the hormones estrogens, bind to and then activate estrogen receptor and exert estrogen-like effect under certain experimental conditions in vitro and in vivo. So that leads to the objective is to determine whether isolevins exert estrogen-like effect in men by lowering bioavailability through evaluation of the effects of soy protein or isolevin intake on T, SHBG, T, and FAI in men. So that's all I have to say about the background of isolevins. Now I would like to turn to the second part of my presentation is effects on hormones of isolevins. Now in 2008, Martin and Lewis published a key report of a 16-year-old man with gynecomastia and dramatically elevated estrogen levels, thought to have resulted from the consumption of isolevin containing soy milk. The subjects described in the key reports were said to have consumed 3 quarts of soy milk daily, provide approximately 300 mg of isolevin. And in comparison, typical intake among older men in Japan and Shanghai is approximately 40 mg per day. Now let me turn to Gynecomastia. So what is Gynecomastia? Gynecomastia is a condition of overdevelopment or enlargement of the breast tissue in the men or boys. This is because of imbalance between estrogen, which stimulate, and androgens, which inhibit breast tissue proliferation, is often the cause of gynecomastia. Now we'll move on to soy isolevins and estrogen. Take a look at this table. 9 studies were identified that examine the effects of isolevin supplements or soy foods on 17-beta estradiol and estrogen levels in men. So, of the 9 studies, study 85 and 87 reported that following soy exposure, statistically significant changes in estrogen levels occurs in comparison with baseline values and control group, but it is normal. And in study 86, they saw that have highest isolevin exposure, and in other 6 studies, they saw that no significant changes. That led to the results. Overall, the finding indicated that even in response to isolevin intakes that greatly exceed typical values and amounts obtainable through reasonable dietary behavior, isolevins do not affect estrogen levels. Therefore, if isolevin were reasonable for the rise in estrogen level and the gynecomastia noted in the case report, it was almost certainly caused by excessive isolevin intake and possibly also because the subject in this question were particularly sensitive to isolevins, as the highest isolevin exposure in the study in table 1 were less than half the estimated exposure that reportedly led to the gynecomastia. So we will move on to soy isolevins and testosterone. The clinical data were meta-analyzed to determine whether soy or isolevin intake affect total testosterone, free testosterone, estradiol, estrogen, and sex hormone binding globulin (SHBG). A total of 41 studies were included in the analysis. TT and ST levels were measured in 1753 and 752 men respectively. E2 and E1 levels were measured in 1,239 men, and SHBG were measured in 967 men. So the results are no significant effect of soy protein or isolevin intake on any of the outcomes measured were found, and neither soy protein nor isolevin exposure affects TT, FT, E2, or E1 levels in men. Next is erectile dysfunction ED and sperm and semen effects. Finally, findings from animal studies suggesting that isolevin injury the risk of ED are not applicable to men because the differences in isolevin metabolism between rodent and human and the excessively high amount of isolevin to which the animal were exposed. And sperm and semen effect. Men who were most affected by soy still have a sperm concentration about the level larger to 20 million per milliliter classified by the WHO. Soy had no effect on sperm morphology or motility to measure of semen quality that are thought to import fertility. Now I would like to end with a summary of the main points. First, isoflavones do not exert feminizing effects on men at intake levels equal to and even considerably higher than are typical for Asian males. First, men can feel confident that making soy a part of their diet will not compromise their virility or reproductive health. That brings us to the end of my presentation. So thank you for listening. It was a pleasure being here today. Thank you.